Good morning, good afternoon, and a very happy Wednesday, guys. It is halfway through the week already. We are on hump day. Before I say hello to the chat, welcome my co-host for this morning, NB Geek. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, PV. Great to see you, as
Great
always.
to see you. Absolutely, yes. Love the
And
setup, by the
support
way.
her merch store.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's cool. That is so cool. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm just glad it survived the move.
Yes, yes. You always worry about things getting cracked and chips, but it's so good to see, and great to see you as well.
You too.
Let's see who we have got with us. We've got Brandon, the anime guy, and D-Bud Martin on the wrenches this morning. Thank you, gentlemen. Great to see you. We've got our favourite polar bear, Snorterpoopers. Hello. We've got Archer Colin. Good afternoon. Great to see you. Chris Wood. Hello there. We've got Ren Zero with us as well. We've got the lovely Apollomies Minion. Hello, honey. Good morning. Gun Bunny, hello, sweetheart. Great to see you as always. Let's see, we've got Southern Viking. Great to see you. Hey there. And I saw Jim the Viking as well earlier. Good afternoon. We've got Keely Chow. Roll Tide Keely. We've got Dovian Setovia Segain. Good to see you as always. And I know I saw Salty Texas C as well. Good morning to you. Great to see you. I think that was everybody. No, I missed Jacob Ironside. Hello, love. Great to see you as always. And nearsighted Cyclops, good morning. And Sakarot 315, hello there. So, we were talking over the weekend and we were trying to come up with a fantastic topic to talk about. And by the by, we just sort of kind of stumbled across this topic as we were chatting, didn't we?
Yeah,
We
we
got into
did.
talking about books, and then we were talking about movies, and it sort of kind of evolved into this idea of fantastic or not so fantastic in some cases book adaptations.
It's a really interesting thing when you think about it, Purple Valkyrie. It's only by historical counts, it's only a recent thing to really have books go to film, taking one IP and transferring it to the other. And sometimes we get some gems, and sometimes we get some that it's like, okay, I like the book, I like the movies, and then it's somewhere you're like, they just totally did they even read the book?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Renzira says, I did a book to film adaptations as part of my first degree. Nice. And just before we carry on, let me wish Zakarot 315 a very happy birthday.
Peace and
Oh,
long life.
I hope you have a fantastic day, my love. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Very, very happy birthday to you. Oh, that's fantastic. Show him some love in the chat, guys. Great to have a birthday with us. Thank you. But yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And a lot of people are saying, well, no matter how good the adaptation is, generally the book is always better. How do you feel about that before we get into some examples and really kind of get into the topic?
I would say for the most part, that has generally universally been agreed upon. And I think it was for a long time. I think it's somewhat, maybe because of the advances in technology and things, it's somewhat changed over time to
Hmm.
where it's kind of like you are starting to find, in a lot of cases, a little more balance. But universally, I generally do agree when somebody's read the book or they've seen the movie. Generally, if somebody enjoys the book and they watch the movie, they may enjoy the book, they may enjoy the movie, they may not. But generally speaking, a lot of times it comes down to I thought the book was better for understandable reasons.
Hmm. And for you, is that determined by the book itself, or is it the author, or do you have a kind of I, I wouldn't call it a loyalty to a particular author, but if you know their work and their work gets adapted into a film, do you have do you hold it in higher regard, or do you have higher standards for it because you know that work?
Dune, definitely one. I
Mm-hmm.
would say is the one that has probably had one of the hardest adaptions. I thought the 80s movie, one of its biggest flaws was it was too short to adapt a movie of that size. Sci-Fi did a mini series that was decent, and then we finally got a live adaptation that I personally felt was about as faithful to the book as we're probably ever going to get, at least the first half of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I was one of those people that, although I read the book, I found it not the easiest book to follow. But when I watched the films, and especially you, as you correctly point out, the newest one that we've had, it just brought these characters to life in a way that I had not seen before.
I will say this one thing that is if you get an actor that really stands out as a character from the book, you start to okay. So what some you were saying a minute ago, Purple, is let's look at it this way. Let's kind of deconstruct when you're reading a book. For me, because everybody has different preferences on how they read. Me, I need to be alone, away from people. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need outside distractions. I want to be, kind of in a room with just some white noise going on so I can focus on reading. But when you're reading, think about all the stimulations that are going on in your mind, your visual imagination, if you're like me, sometimes maybe you start to tense up a little bit and maybe think there's some spine tingling music going on during the narration or something that you're
Mm-hmm.
reading. But everything is imaginary. I mean, you get the descriptions of the characters, but I think we've all had times where we've seen a description of a character and then we see the live action and it's either very different from what we thought more often than what we thought would be spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I've got a great comment in that vein from Jaden Hamilton, which I will bring up in just a moment. But let me say, first of all, a huge thank you to Salty Texasy, who sends us a super sticker, and it's a suitcase. Thank you, Salty. Very much appreciated. Um, Jaden says, speaking of this topic, it's a shame how Rafe Judkins and Amazon's arrogance butchered the Wheel of Time. Now, I would say that that's one of the best examples at the moment of them deliberately going out of their way to cast people who really do not fit the characters very well. And I know we've got the same thing people are talking about with the new Amazon Lord of the Rings when that comes out. Do you think that sometimes it's done deliberately, or people do have ideas of what these characters look like, and once they're not seen on screen, then it's more jarring?
Yes, I would say both. And actually, you kind of walked into an area I was going to bring up
Mm-hmm.
about a couple of movie adaptations, mainly Bram Stoker's Dracula and Frankenstein, for the cultural significance of what those movies gave. Even though I've read the books are fantastic and
Mm-hmm.
very different from the movies. For example, in Dracula, the majority of the book is predominantly told from the perspective of news articles and journal entries and letters. That's pretty much how the story is done. It's done in almost a first person point of view from the person writing at that moment to one person or another,
Mm-hmm.
or writing the news article, and the way Dracula is described in the book is more in line with, say, Bram Stoker's Dracula with Keanu Reeves and
Gary Oldman,
thank
yes.
you, Gary Oldman, that
Mm-hmm.
one. He's more in line with the way that visual character looks. But and it's similar with the storyline of Frankenstein. When Frankenstein creates the monster, the first part of the book is literally part of the book is about him creating the monster, but then the key part is afterwards is he rejects the monster, kicks the monster out basically, and it becomes the monster. You see something similar to what the monster does when he's walking around in the movie, but in the book he's angry, he's seeking revenge, and he's not as dim-witted as he's portrayed in the movies. He's very intelligent, and he knows where his anger is focused at. He's all of a sudden born and he's discarded like garbage,
Hmm.
literally after he's born. I'm pretty sure anybody who's intelligent with the thing, trying to wrap your head around, I've just been born and now I'm kicked out into this. Don't know what's going on. Yeah, he wanted revenge. But
Yes, and I think that's why one of the more recent ones, I think it was the one by Kenneth Branagh, if I remember, directed it or had Kenneth Branagh in. It's a much more sympathetic take on the creature, whereas with before we've had just straight up horror where it's a monster. That's a really interesting point.
what you not but sorry. What is also different is the way the monster looks. If you read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and hear the description from Frankenstein himself to what we see, and then also what we see in Dracula, but those have become the iconic looks. This was the first time, I mean, these people had, probably read these books, and this was their first experience getting to see them on a big screen. And I mean, we're talking era before, I mean, most of their entertainment was radio shows
Hmm.
or the newspaper or, things like that. So they became iconic because this became the first visual representation on the big screen. And I think that's why those particular images of those characters have lasted so long, even though they don't look anything like really the characters from the book, the way they're described.
Yes, they become kind of embedded in the public consciousness. When you think of Dracula, you think of him in the, evening dress with the cape, looking like Bela Lugosi. Yeah.
Well, another factor too is PV is if when you read these books, they are way dark. I mean, we talk about censorship now. Let's remember, we're talking the 30s here. This is before the rating systems are even created in America. And I don't know when the UK came up with theirs, but there were censoring things. I mean, think about it. In Dracula, he does not show fangs.
Hmm.
We never see any type of blood. In fact, we never actually see him actually bite anybody. It's just kind of that, but they were able to really work around some of the graphic stuff from the books that there was no way they were going to get away with in the 1930s cinema.
Absolutely, yes. And do you think that as cinema has kind of evolved, do you think that they've kind of pushed what they can do? I mean, obviously, standards have changed. What people would find scandalous now, would have been unheard of back in the 40s and 50s, and things that they would have found kind of controversial back then, we wouldn't even bat an eyelid at now.
Oh, yes, quite a bit. Um, Equated to kind of like, say, the comic code we used to have. That used to be the thing that had to be stamped on all DC, all Marvel, all approved comics. And if they weren't approved by the comic code, they didn't have it. Like the Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, those kind of things weren't approved by the comic code. They were still made. But the comic code was supposed to be your seal of approval. It's like, yeah, we've censored, which basically was, hey, we censored this. I mean, it's what it was.
It was, yeah, it absolutely was. And I think we talked briefly on Monday about censorship and how books are being censored and books are being banned. I'm not going to kind of go into that direction today, but it does seem to be books that have been around for quite a while are the ones that are being targeted now. And even books like 1984, for example, which have been made into movies several times, and great movies are now banned. It's a very strange direction we're taking.
I think it's a direction we have taken before in history. Depending on what country you're from, many countries have done this. I'm not going to specify the one that I know everybody knows about that was famous for book banning, but they weren't the only ones.
Mm-hmm.
Russia was doing it too. China does it now. I think one of the things, Purple Valkyrie, is too many people of the current generation that are trying to read this stuff or even trying to watch the movies, they're thinking in modern perspective, modern day values, modern day ethics, modern day, what we do in 2022. They can't seem to get their head out of their ass and realize some of this shit was written back in the 1800s. Some of it was written in the 1600s. Some of this, I'm sorry, I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and those were written, what, over 1,000 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to remember there's a way people talk. There was a mannerism. Some things that we describe as racist now wouldn't even have been thought of that way back then. In fact, I don't even know if they had a comprehension for that term in the modern context we have. So that's really where I think a lot of the problem has been, is people are trying to take their modern ideology, their modern ethics, their modern thesis, and try to say, well, this is how it should have been back then. Yeah, but it wasn't.
Yes, you're comparing apples and oranges. Yes.
That's why we learn history. I mean, I'm sorry, folks, but got news for you. Back when Shakespeare was writing plays, guess who were playing the women?
Yes. Yes, women were not allowed on stage back then. Absolutely.
Oh, Jaden Hamilton brings up the Divine Comedy. I actually just bought that this week, 2 weekends ago. That is one on my list I have not read yet.
It is a great read, and we're talking about some fantastic books, but let's just kind of steer it back to the adaptations. We talked about some of the more out there adaptations, but for you, we talked about Dune, which has been a fantastic example. But what other examples of really great books do you think have translated very well onto screen?
I would say the Lord of the Rings books.
Oh, yes.
I would honestly say that. I know that sounds to some people kind of like an easy thing, but it's really not, because I'm one of those few people who actually enjoys the movies more than the books. And I think I've told you this, PV, before. I'm sure I have. Sword and sorcery is always hit or miss for me in our geek culture. It's always just been one of those areas. It's just not my niche.
Yeah, you're more of a sci-fi guy, aren't you? Yeah.
I'm more of a space opera kind of guy. Yes. I do enjoy sword and sorcery at times, but as far as reading, I don't know. They look better on screen than they do on paper per se. I thought the trilogy actually just really did a nice job. I'm not the hugest Tolkien fan, so I don't know the lore as well as some people do, like maybe you and other people do. But I thought they were really, having read them years prior and then reading them again before the movies came out, I thought, damn, this is actually a pretty good adaptation. I would say one of the better ones we've seen in modern time.
Yes, they really are, and I think that's a testament to how much respect they had, not only for the author but for the source material. And with a lot of these books, especially the classics that people have a lot of love for, it is how close are they following the source material. We've talked about casting, but it's even more than that. But the Lord of the Rings is a fantastic example of what you can do with a book that a lot of people didn't think could actually be translated faithfully into films.
I agree. I think that there are some that are not adaptable. For example, what is it? Sandman's coming out on Amazon or something soon.
Yep, that's Netflix. Yeah,
I'm a huge Sandman fan, but I've said this many times. I think this is an unadaptable material.
I always said it would have been better animated rather than live action.
I would agree.
I thought you could really get the animation to capture the characters much better.
I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that. One of the key things that I think people forget when they talk about dream, death, and all them, what we're seeing is just the manifestation that has been allowed for us to see. Because throughout the story, if Dream goes to another part of the world, he's viewed differently. They don't see the same pale white dark hair cloak we see. If he goes and sees someone who believes in Dream in, say, Africa or Asia
Hmm.
or some other person, he looks very different to them.
Yes, and that's what I'm wondering. Are they going to incorporate that into the TV show, or are we going to have the characters with the actors that have been already cast and just keep them as they are? If they use that, trope and make them look like different people throughout the show, depending on who's viewing them, that would be fantastic because that is true to the source material. Um, Dovi and Toyas again has got a question for you. Says, what do you think of the Foundation adaptation?
I'm not 100% sure what he means by that.
Okay, okay. If you could just elaborate in the chat, that would be great. Thank you, Dovi.
Uh,
Brandon says Lord of the Rings worked because Peter Jackson gave a damn. Absolutely, then that is a big point as well.
Jaden Hamilton here had a question. It goes, the Lucifer comic. To answer your question, no, you do not have to read Sandman to read the Lucifer comic. It is the Lucifer from the Sandman comic. You do not need that comic. You do not need to read Sandman though, at all.
Hmm. But I would recommend it because they are great books, and man,
I
it's one
would
of the
agree.
ones I read back in, I think it was the early 90s, and I because it was so different. I was used to reading, superheroes, but this really captured my imagination, and I was really excited for having a live action version. But I don't know. I think it's going to be yet another Netflix fail, unfortunately.
Well, it was interesting because we had the Lucifer comic book, which was the adaptation for the Lucifer TV show that
Hmm.
was on Fox and then eventually went to Netflix. And they are almost dynamically different IPs. They are so completely different. They're based on the characters that Neil Gaiman made, but Maze doesn't really act like the Maze we know. Lucifer doesn't act like, because Lucifer in the comic, he's very serious, very stern, very he's not, he doesn't have sex a lot, he doesn't drink a lot, he doesn't smoke a lot in the comic. Uh the one thing they did do that I thought was very well was point out that he really does not want to be worshipped.
Hmm.
See, that's the key thing about the comic and the series. I thought was a real good thing. Was his point is he doesn't want, everybody thinks he wants to be worshipped over God, and it's actually no, he doesn't want to be worshipped. He's actually very against that.
Yes. I would definitely recommend reading the books and watching the show because I know a lot of people really enjoyed it. But that is a great example of where something deviates. Another one that I know that we talked about, and we've talked about, Stephen King quite a bit, behind the scenes. Would be something like The Shining, for example. Now
Mm.
King absolutely hated what Kubrick did with that book, but most people say that it is a great film, even though it deviates very far from the tone of the book and even the characters.
That is one book of Stephen King's I actually have not read yet. I read a lot of Stephen King books. That one I did not read, and I only recently saw the movie The Shining about 6 months ago. I will say this about the movie: if it wasn't for the score, the movie would be boring.
Mm.
If it wasn't for the music, the movie would just be boring, in my opinion.
Yes, I really do like The Shining. I think it's great, and I was actually surprised by the sequel that they did as well. Doctor Sleep was a lot better than I expected, but I can see why King was so aggrieved with what Kubrick did, because he basically took the book follows and focuses very much on Danny, the little boy. It's his story, but the film shifts focus to Jack Nicholson's character, which from a film perspective makes a lot more sense to focus on the adult, especially when you've got someone as off the wall as Jack Nicholson playing this character.
It was definitely, I think it's one of those ones where I've heard a lot of people enjoy the book and they enjoy the movie and they enjoy them for completely different reasons. And I think there is room for that. There needs to be room for that in culture. I know there's room for it in our culture because, let's be honest, so many IPs we have now, shit, 20 years ago, we couldn't have imagined the IPs we love crossing so many boundaries. TV, films, live action plays, theater stuff. Some of the stuff we grew up on as kids and got made fun of is now making bank. And it's like, oh, you're welcome.
We always knew it was good. We were back in the day fans of these things. Absolutely.
I will say one that was definitely is, did you ever read Starship Troopers?
I did, yes. And I've watched the film. Yes. Again, great. Both great for different reasons. Do you want to go into it a little bit as to why they're so different?
Okay, let's go into this. Okay, in Starship Troopers, the book, well, first off, the character Johnny Rico, his name is actually Juan Rico.
Mm-hmm.
Dizzy is a male, not a female. The character of Carmen is not his girlfriend, never was his girlfriend in the book in the books. And the Bug War is really a backdrop. The entire story is about really Juan Rico joining the mobile infantry and his process through the next few years of his life. Whereas and that's how the book portrays it. It's really Juan's journey, and the war is just a backdrop. Whereas in the movie, the war is heavily focused. It's heavily commercial militarily, which the book does do too. But the book does it more in a serious fashion. The book is very serious, and also the book has the mobile infantry in mobile infantry suits.
Yes, I think power suits. Yes, Psychodwarf says the power suits. Yes.
Yeah. But still, it was a fun romp 90s action movie. It was just a summer popcorn flick that was fun, entertaining, didn't take itself seriously, and managed to take a book that I quite frankly very much love, take a very serious note, and actually make it kind of almost satire-y.
It really did, yes. And if anyone's ever only watched the film, I think they would be quite shocked as to see it's almost tonally night and day difference, because one is very pro-war with going up against the bugs, and it's very gung-ho, whereas the book is a lot more reserved and it's more about the war, as you say, is the backdrop rather than the main focus.
Well, I like one point in the book, one of the details in the book. So Juan does not, Johnny, I'm just going to call him Johnny or Juan, but anyway, it's the same person. When Johnny goes with his friends to sign up for active duty, he doesn't initially, in the movie, he just initially signs up for mobile infantry. That's not what happens in the book. In the book, he actually has several choices he picks from. Eventually ends up going to mobile infantry. And when you see that scene with the guy, the recruiter at the counter with no legs and no hand, actually in the book, this is actually explained very well versus in the movie. In the movie, it's just kind of like, oh shit, what's he getting himself into? In the book, Johnny sees him afterwards, and he sees the guy with mechanical legs and a mechanical arm on his hand. He goes, yeah, I'm mainly up there to dissuade people from joining.
Yes.
And he's like, look, everybody, one of the things that is also mentioned in the book, everybody can serve. He even states you could put a blind, deaf guy in a wheelchair, and he says, we'll find him a job. Might not be a great job, but we'll find him one. And he's trying to relay that to Johnny. He's like, hey, just because we say everybody can join doesn't mean it's for everybody. There was some really power in the dialogue he was having with him there.
Mm-hmm.
It unfortunately it wouldn't have fit in the movie per se, because the movie is meant to be more I don't think comical. I think satirical would be the
I would
proper
say it's satirical. It's a lot more. It's a lot light-hearted, and as you say, it's a lot more. It's a popcorn film. Definitely, it's all about the action. At the time, it was about the CG with the bugs, which surprisingly still holds up pretty well. If you watch the film now, it still looks pretty good. I was surprised. I watched it only a couple of months ago just to kind of have a refresh of it. But I like both of them, but for totally different reasons, and neither is I would say better than the other because they are so different. It just seems to work, and I think that's one of the few really good examples of a book and a film kind of deviating but still not detracting from one another. Colin asks, have you read either the Forever War, which is always recommended after reading Starship Troopers, or The Moon is a Harsh Mistress?
No, actually, I have not read those. I will definitely put those on my list. Are they by the same author, I think?
I would imagine so. Yeah, I haven't read them myself.
Yeah, I've only read a few of his books. I don't try to. You asked me a question if I have a loyalty to a certain author. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say I have a loyalty, but I do have a bias to where I will gravitate towards certain authors by their name recognition. I generally will go look for certain authors and specifically look and see
Yes.
what they've got out. Uh, Jim Butcher.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, there's one right there for you, Purple Valkyrie. The Dresden Files. Are you familiar with them?
I've heard of them, but I've never read them. But I know that you're a fan. Just before we get into that, could I just say a big thank you once more to Salty Texas, who sends us a super sticker, and it's a Shiba Inu. And we have a brand new member joining us. So a very warm welcome to Tovian Desoy Tovia Seguin. I can never pronounce that correctly, so I'm just going to say warm welcome, Dovi. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate that. But yes, Dresden Files. I know that you've talked about this in the past.
Yeah, Dresden Files. So basically, it's a pretty simple premise. He's a wizard in modern day America. Uh, Wizards do exist, fairies exist, all this stuff. The books are fantastic. I love them. And then Sci-Fi did a series on it some years back. I don't remember exactly. And Archer Colin, I'm glad you liked the show. I really did not like it at all. First off, I didn't like the fact that Dresden was not walking around with his hat and his duster on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain visual images of also the actor they had for him, who was Black Canary's dad, the cop on whatever Arrow, Flash, whatever. Good actor, not the actor for Dresden. He was horribly miscast for that. The CGI was garbage. There was, for a show that's supposed to be about a wizard, there's hardly any magic. It was rather.
Sounds like they didn't quite capture the spirit of the books then.
No, they did not. And unfortunately, this is an area where I will say I'm very biased. I very much love the books. It would be like somebody also taking, say, a Simon R. Green book, who's a very famous sci-fi writer from the UK. Actually, one of my all-time favorites. I actually gravitated towards him because he was recommended in a Jim Butcher book I had from my Dresden, and I fell in love with the guy. So if some of his adaptions if they took The Night Side, one of my favorite book series, and they tried to make that into a series, and they don't do it with the dark, gritty, because in the Night Side, it's set basically in the other dimension of the United Kingdom, because
Mm-hmm.
his stuff predominantly takes place in the United Kingdom. Yep, Hawk and Fisher. There's
Hawk
another
and
one.
Fisher. Yes.
Yeah, that's another one from
Yes.
Simon R. Green.
And
So I've never
this
seen
is an
any of
author I
his stuff.
haven't read. Yeah, but you did
I,
recommend him to me, and as a Brit, I'm a little bit embarrassed that I haven't read him because he is a British author, obviously. But NB gave me some really good recommendations. So again, this is going to be someone I'm going to check out.
yeah, none of his stuff has been adapted as far as I know. But I'd like to see
No,
some of it someday if done right, getting the right, people. Uh, oh, take
he.
take this for example, Purple Valkyrie,
Mhm.
as trying to take a cross IP that failed. Look at Why the Last Man.
Yes. Well,
What
that
a
was
letdown.
yes, and this is coming from people that actually loved the comics, even though that the message was the same. You know, it was all there. It wasn't because the show went woke. It was because it was a really terribly adapted show. You know, and they
Yeah.
could have had the message from the start, but they were so heavy-handed with it, it just completely fell apart.
Well, what killed me for it was when I saw an article where they were like, "Oh, well, he doesn't have to," because remember, he's walking around for a lot of time with that mask on, so
Hmm.
nobody knows he's a man. And they were like, "Well, everybody would just assume he's a transgender." That was kind of the message they were trying to. I'm like, and they had a transgender in there
Hmm.
who's not from the comic and is literally nobody but somebody who's just literally moping around about, I don't feel special anymore because, when there were men, I was different. Now I'm, yeah, it's like, oh God, it's the dialogue was cringeworthy to say the least.
It was a very I think ham-fisted way to try and bring in modern day politics, which we've seen a lot with a lot of these shows, but it could have been done um, a lot cleverer had they had better writers, I think. But yeah, it was a absolute letdown of a show. Um, and I think we talked about it behind the scenes as well, but it seems to be the case, especially with comic book adaptations, and even more so than novels, where it seems to fall apart.
I mean, we get some gems. We do get some gems. Like for example, we can go all the way back to the Wizard of Oz. And if you've ever read The Wizard of Oz and then watched the old classic movie that most of us have seen, you want to talk about miles apart.
Oh yes. And do you think it's fair to say that most people haven't read the book now because of obviously how old it is? People just think of the musical, and that's their only impression that they have of Wizard of Oz. Because Wizard of Oz isn't just the one story; it's a whole series of books.
I've actually read the first three. And actually, it's kind of funny because if you took, is it Isman of Oz, the second book,
Hmm.
this book would actually be one that could be something I think people would be interested in because the book is about a princess who has been transformed into a male and has been this way his entire life because he's in hiding. And part of it is him wrestling with the idea of being magically turned into a female to be the princess of Ozma. And there's some internal struggles there where they're like, wait a minute, this is how I've been my whole life. You just want me to change, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I mean, that could actually be one that would be pretty easy to adapt for modern time.
Yes, I think going back, a lot of people they forget that these books exist, and two they don't want to take a chance on them. Um, we were talking a little bit about Stephen King, I know as well, and we've talked some of his books, but one of the ones that really surprised us. when it was adapted into a film was Gerald's Game, for example. And
Oh
I
god.
think both of us didn't believe that this film could actually be this book could get anywhere near the terror that the book brings.
Please, PV, explain to people what Gerald's Game is about.
Yeah, so Gerald's Game, it is about a husband and wife who have they're kind of on the verge of going through a divorce, so they want to have a romantic getaway together to kind of rekindle things, to try and get to know each other again and see if the spark's still there. And but one of the things that the husband wants to kind of bring into is he likes to use bondage, basically. So the wife isn't too keen on this, but she's willing to give it a go, and basically things spiral out of control very, very quickly, and she finds herself trapped, alone, handcuffed to the bed with nothing but her own thoughts and memories, and she has to find a way to free herself.
And that is pretty much the book. This is a psychological thriller that I think is very underrated in Stephen King's library collection of books. I'd put it up there with Misery, because literally in comparison, they both dramatically take place in one spot, in literally in one area, a bed. That's the majority of both premises.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's different things going on in Misery. That's another great film adaptation I absolutely loved. But
Yes.
and we should definitely pull that one in next. But with Gerald's Game, there was so much going on in her mind that you weren't sure what was real, what wasn't, what she was thinking, what was reality, and she's trying to think. I mean, the whole book is literally, I mean, she's trying to get out of these handcuffs. And by the way, I don't know if it was mentioned in the movie, I can't remember, but in the book, it was specifically mentioned these were handcuffs for women.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he got them from a police officer friend, if I remember correctly. So these weren't, cheap ones that you pick up at a certain adult store. These were the real deal.
And she's, chained to the post. She's trying to get to a glass of water at some points while also trying to figure out how she's going to be able to get her hand out. And she sees this horror image in her mind of a person who's staring at her from the bed at times. And you don't know if this stuff is in her mind or it's real, because it's honestly, if you think about it, it's a very scary situation. You're trapped, tied to a bed, and there's a figure there. And whether it's a real figure or it's just something imaginary, the point is your mind is believing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's not a damn thing you can do. And I really thought they really upped their game with this movie. I mean, it's low budget, obviously. It's got a great couple of cast members. You don't need that many.
Yes, it's Carla Gugino, if I remember correctly, who plays Jesse, and Bruce Greenwood, who plays Gerald, who is in amazing shape. He's not in it for very long, unfortunately, but I was really impressed with this cast.
I enjoyed actually the difference between how he dies in the book, and spoiler alert, Gerald dies. Sorry, folks, that's the very beginning of the book. But the way Gerald dies in the book versus the way he died in the movie, I thought was actually an interesting change.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the book, she freaks out and assaults him, and I think she knees him in the groin or the stomach, and he ends up getting a heart attack because of that. Whereas in the book, which basically there's a reason why this is going on, because he's getting to a point where this is going from consensual to the next level. And she's not comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, she doesn't have to stop him. He stops himself, and he's kind of, just a little freaked out at why she's like, and then he ends up having the heart attack. It just happens spur of the moment. I thought those were two very interesting differences between how they decided to play that out. But I will say this, the moment I saw the dog in the film, I was like, oh, fuck. I know what's coming. I know what's coming with the dog.
Yes, and I really liked it, and I was surprised. I've got to admit, like you said, it was one of those ones that I didn't watch for a very long time because I'd read the book and I thought, nah, there's no way that they're going to be able to do this justice, but they really did, and I've had this a few times with a lot of but I've read the book and it's only been down the line when I've bothered to watch the film. So things like Life of Pi, for example, I thought was a great book, but I put off watching the film because I wasn't sure if it could really be translated, and I was very much surprised how well the Ang Lee pulled it off.
Well, I think Ang Lee needs to stick with what he's good at.
Hmm.
That's more his area. Ang Lee, Life of Pi, good movie. Stay out of the Marvel stuff, okay? No more Hulk stuff. That's not your area, buddy. Sorry, just know your limitations. It's okay. Well, Purple Valkyrie, have you ever ran into an area? You kind of brought it up there,
Hmm.
uh, where we're. I think now with the current social media and constant bombardments, whether we want them or not, we're really wary about going to see a book adaptation now because if we, I mean, we're getting attacked for comparing them. They're like, you shouldn't be comparing them. It's like, why the hell not? That's kind of what we do. That's kind of our shtick in geek
Exactly.
community.
Yes. Why should, we be, criticized for wanting a if we're going to get a adaptation of a book for it not to be what we remember? Why should the screen adaptation be able to take huge liberties with either the cast or the plot or whatever it is that they decide to change? It comes down to a lot of these, and Lord of the Rings is and obviously Wheel of Time that we talked about in the chat are some of the best examples. They are, in name only. They don't bear any resemblance to what people remember reading.
And I think in some areas when it comes to certain IPs, that's why I said I think we do have certain biases when it's like, okay, maybe an IP that was adapted, we're a little more flexible on versus if it's a certain IP, we're very much more critical of. And I think it just depends on the genre they adapt. Like for example, oh God, Dungeons and Dragons. What
Mm-hmm.
a horrible freaking movie. It was like, okay,
I
we got a
remember that film.
human. It's like their idea of, hey, how do we make this D&D movie? Okay, we'll have a thief human. We'll get you an elf, and we'll get you a mage, and we'll throw a dragon in there for good measure. Yeah, I think that was as far as the thought process got.
Yes, didn't that film have Jeremy Irons in, if I remember correctly, as
It
the
did,
bad guy?
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Jeremy Irons, buddy, I love you, man. You're a great actor. Oh God, doesn't it suck when you see an actor you really respect and you're just like, oh, you poor bastard.
But look, Salty says, but wait, there's another round of bad D&D movies coming as well as a TV series. Oh God. That doesn't surprise me considering the way that they've attacked, tabletop gaming and especially Dungeons and Dragons. And I know they've gone after Warhammer as well. This seems to be the next phase of where this kind of spreading the message in quotations is heading.
Well, oh yeah, that whole thing where, well, I don't see myself in these. I don't see my representation in this game. It's a pen and paper dice game with dragons, orcs, cyborgs. Depending on which you're playing, whether you're playing cyberpunk, whether you're playing vampire or
Hmm.
werewolf, palladium. Yes, folks, there's more than D&D out there. I know the geek community here knows that shit. But I literally think there are people who still think that role playing is all D&D, and there's so much more game out there than just that.
Hmm.
And they don't grasp the message of what that is. And it's sad. But
Wasn't that the whole point of these sort of games? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea was that you got to create your own character. You got to be whatever it is you wanted to be in the setting of this world. You know, the only limitation was your imagination.
Well, I mean, and that's why, so many of their books they'd come out with, yep, Runcrest, Traveler, GURP, yep, GURPS,
Yep. Yep.
definitely no GURPS. And, well, I mean, that was the thing is you would have, the companion books that would come out, races from D&D, or in Star Wars, races from Star Wars, lightsabers from Stars. When West End Games owned Star Wars, I used to be the GM for that one. And, my buddies made some really fun characters. I mean, I just let them kind of have fun. We had one who was a drunken Jawa named Waco. That was my buddy James. We had a buddy who was what was he? He was a Jawa technician. So I had an Ewok and a Jawa in the game. We had some fun times, and honestly, that was what I did most of my junior high and high school weekends. And trust me, it's probably what kept me out of trouble.
hmm I've heard that from a lot of people. They loved just getting to have this break from reality and to be able to sit down with a group of friends and really invest themselves in a game. Um, and this was back in the day when you could get bullied for doing this sort of thing. You were looked down on if you were a geek or a nerd, if you read sci-fi, if you read fantasy, if you played Dungeons and Dragons. But people still did it because it brought them joy. Now, if you try and do it, you can do it, but there are others who want to come in and say this isn't yours anymore, and that's the issue that people have. It's not that it's not inclusive. It's not that we don't want other people. It's the whole coming in and changing things, and we just getting back to the film and book adaptations. We see it all the time as well.
Yeah, it's like, for example, what was it somebody said about Tolkien? I think it was on your channel or Loki's, or maybe I just read in the article where it was they one of the people was commenting, yeah, we're putting things in that Tolkien forgot. Wait a minute, you mean
Yes.
you're adding things that you say he forgot about a universe he created?
Yes, yes, as if they know better than the master of high fantasy himself, Tolkien. Absolutely.
I'm
It,
sorry,
it,
but I'll take Tolkien and I'm sorry, but when it comes to interpretations of worlds they created, I'll take C.S. Lewis and I'll take Tolkien over some guy who comes in 30, 40 years after the fact and says, well, this is really how it should have been interpreted.
yes,
Or
this
this is really what they meant. Or this is really, well, we need to add this stuff because this is what's going on now. It's like,
hmm
yeah, but that's now in our world. This is a world that is complete. This is Middle Earth. What does
yes,
that have to do with with modern life? It's
yes.
like, oh
All we
well, we
want
need to
is
incorporate,
escapism. Exactly.
and that was one of the things I think really that Lord of the Rings was able to adapt very well, both from the books for people who love the books and people who enjoy the movies, is it did provide that escapism. And that's what I think a lot of us have been pissed about lately, especially when we talk about books, we get an adaptation of something, and it's like, oh, well, we're going to interject what we think. And you brought up a good point where, they're coming into the sand, but it basically is they're coming into our sandbox and telling us, well, I don't see myself in here. It's like, no, you want to see yourself in here. The problem is you don't like the rest of us in here
hmm
because you
Yeah.
think we are the wrong in the way we've been interpreting this for the rest of our entire lives. And instead of coming in and trying to learn our culture, you just want to come in like a wrecking ball and say, no, this is how it should be. Well, sorry, I am one of those guys who did get beat up in school and got picked on for reading RPG games during my break times and reading comic books. So, yeah, sorry. We went to the school of hard knocks to be geeks. You don't just get to come in and say, "Oh, I'm a geek now." It's like, "Great, come on in." Well, I want this and this and this to change.
Yes, and
Yeah, go build
uh,
your own shit.
and this is what we've seen definitely, at least in the past, I'd say 10 years. The whole idea of you geek chic, how it's cool to be a nerd now, but it's a very different idea from what it was back in the 80s and 90s.
Oh yeah, we took a lot of it. We didn't actually, when you think about it, back in the day, back in the '90s and stuff, for us, we didn't really think about. I don't think we really thought about adaptions of movies to from
Mm-mm.
books to movies. I don't think we really gave that much. We might have seen a movie come out that was adapted to a movie, or it was adapted from a book, but a lot of times it was something we had never even read.
Could I throw like half a dozen at you and see just a like a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you think
Go for it.
they were great? So one that I would always bring up, All Quiet on the Western Front.
Great book, great movie, but I think also because of when the movie was made.
Hmm. Absolutely. Gone with the Wind.
Did not read the book. I cannot handle the movie. I cannot stand I cannot stand Scarlet.
Don't like Scarlet. I, I I like it in moderation. It's been a long time since I've seen it. What about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is obviously Blade Runner?
Blade Runner.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't care for Blade Runner personally. I've only read the book once, but I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the book. But it was not, like the movie. It's not one that really holds a place in my heart.
Hmm. How about To Kill a Mockingbird, one that I think a lot of people should read? If I remember correctly, it's actually been moved onto the banned books list for a lot of schools. But I thought, great book, fantastic film adaptation.
That is one on my list to watch. I did read the book in school. It was required reading when I was in
Hmm.
school. What is going on with this required reading in school? Now they're banning him.
Yep, there is quite an extensive book list of books that are no bueno anymore that they don't want kids to read.
Oh, I got one for you. Lord of the Flies.
Love the book, and I really did like the film adaptation.
That they really did a good job with that one for the time. There was something about old interpretations back then that somehow they managed to make work real well. I mean, they still made you feel bad for Piggy.
Hmm. And I would say I think a lot of people don't either like the book or the film because not just of the subject matter, but because it is very much it's a boys' book. It's about not just what happens when society breaks down, but what happens when it's just a group of boys left to their own devices as well, which I think is a fascinating idea.
Well, I thought it's a good concept because okay, they're all from a boy. Somebody might ask, why is it all boys? It's an all boys school. They're, if I'm not mistaken, they're British kids going from an all boys school. They were on a trip uh, on the ocean. I assume in the English Channel, and it crashes. Most of the kids survive. The boys survive, but there's no adults. So the point is, what do all these adolescent, pre-pubescent kids going to do to survive? And it
Hmm.
really did have an interesting take in. And somebody a year ago was talking about they wanted to do a remake of Lord of the Flies and make it all female. And I'm like,
I
okay,
remember that. Yes.
okay, take an all female cast of Lord of the Flies. Say it's an all girl school. I'll go with that.
Hmm.
The dynamic will be completely different because boys
Yes.
and girls at those ages, we are different. Well, we're always different, but our biological, chemical, and all that makeup, and our upbringing, especially at the time of that movie being made and the book being made, is very different.
It
So the women
really
would
is.
be probably in a better position, I think, in a lot of ways.
I part of me would be very curious to see if it could be done, to see what the take would be, but at the same time, I know that they would probably not be true, because getting a group of girls together versus getting a group of boys together, it's, as you say, a very, very different dynamic.
As it should be.
Mhm. But I really liked it. That's a great one. And then the other one that I wanted to bring up, because I think it's one of those films that it's a go-to film. Obviously, it's The Godfather, but I've actually never read the book.
I've never read the book either. In fact, I'm terrified to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honestly terrified to read the book because well, here's for me when I first saw The Godfather. I saw it on VHS, but I saw it in chronological order of Godfather 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
There was a special collection back in the 90s, and actually, a friend of mine, PCAT, sent me a link to get it actually a transferred copy in Blu-ray, which I absolutely love. So what it does is it takes The Godfather 2, all the stuff that happened with the Robert De Niro character, and puts that at the beginning. Then you get to the Godfather movie, and then you get to the second half of the Godfather 2, where it's dealing with Michael Corleone. And I when I first saw it, that was the first way I saw it. So to me, it flows better,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's very long. But it's The Godfather, and I love gangster movies.
Pretty much everybody I've spoken to loves the Godfather movies, and I do too. But I love to hear people's take on it. And let me say a very good morning to Adega Outlaw. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well today. Adega had some fantastic streams on Monday, so a really, really great book launch for him. Really proud of what happened. I think we could do a part 2 of this because we've barely scratched the surface, and
Oh
we.
yeah, there is so many more we could definitely talk about. Uh, well, get with me on when you want to do another one. I'll put another list together for myself. I couldn't believe that Lord of the Flies didn't even cross my mind until the end.
Yes, it is weird when you start digging into it, just how many, especially, some of the more controversial ones, because I would have brought up something like A Clockwork Orange, for example. Very controversial, both the book and the novel, but both I really enjoyed for different reasons. Same with Fight Club.
Yeah, you see, I didn't know Fight Club or A Clockwork Orange were books before the movies. I've seen Fight Club. I've never. I'm going to be honest. Clockwork Orange looks just a little too disturbing, even for my tastes.
It's not an easy watch and it's not an easy read either, but I really like both of them because I do like films that are kind of out there. We're getting some really great recommendations in the chat as well. Someone Viking
Oh,
says
Fahrenheit 451.
451. Yes, you saw that.
I've read the book and I remember the original movie that came out back in the day. That is actually one we should save for next time because Fahrenheit 451 is probably one of Ray Bradbury's best works.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I think we definitely need to do a part 2. If the chat are up for that, because I am definitely up for this. I think it's a fantastic subject, and as you say, we've barely scratched the surface. We've kind of jumped from genre to genre, but we could really dig into the sci-fi. We can dig more into, crime, because there's got to be more crime-based books that have been adapted, and
We could probably go into some noir stuff from.
mm-hmm.
Think of some noir adaptions. That would be
Yes.
interesting.
And even
Uh,
things like Sense and Sensibility,
ah,
yeah.
there you go. Another one. How adaptions work for, say, Shakespeare's play.
Yes. And
Now, like I said, I'm about to attempt to read my first Shakespeare.
oh, Hamlet. Nice.
Well, this is always the one that has anytime anybody tells me about Shakespeare and trying to read it, this is the one that gets recommended to me the most.
Mm-hmm. I
And
would
I was
recommend Hamlet or Macbeth, definitely. Either of those would
Well,
be a good
actually,
one.
Macbeth was the second one I heard the most, so I think that's next on my list. Uh, Somebody was like, "Why didn't you start with Romeo and Juliet?" I'm like, I don't really think I want my first adaptation into uh, Shakespeare being about two teenagers with parent issues and feuding. I'm like, I get enough of that at home.
And Jacob Ironside brings up a great one as well. He says, I don't know if you've talked about it. What about the Jaws book versus movie? Heard the book wasn't very good. Read the book. I actually preferred the movie, although the book is very good. There's definitely deviation from it, very much like there is with Jurassic Park, which I also love the book and the movie of, but for different reasons. So I absolutely think we need to do a part 2 of this.
Oh yeah, you could do a whole list of Michael Crichton and oh, what's the guy who does the Rainbow Six books?
Oh, crap. The
Well, you know
chat
who I'm
will know.
talking.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Chat will know. But
Yeah, the chat will know. Somebody's gonna know. Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy.
thank you.
That was a guy I'd seen a lot of. And then there are some like a lot of old stories like Man in the Iron Mask or the Three
Hmm.
Musketeers. I generally enjoy the film adaptations, even Moby Dick and Les Miserables, but the books are very hard to get through, and now there's a reason for that.
Yes, yes. Well, going all the way back to things like Hunchback of Notre Dame as well. Yes. Before we do wrap up and let everybody get on with their Wednesday, what have you got coming up? Because I think we're gonna have to talk in the green room about doing another one of these.
Oh yeah, definitely. I generally do a Sunday stream history of film. We got an idea for Sunday with Alicia and Jack Beers.
Cool.
We do about an hour of that on at 3 p.m. on Sundays. And then after that, I generally just kind of throw up something when I'm in the mood to post. I am going to do a review on Top Gun Maverick. I'm
Hmm.
just going to say this. If you enjoyed the first movie, I highly recommend the second movie.
I've heard really good things about it. Everybody who's seen it so far said it's a great fun film.
There is one thing I thought I was listening to some other people who had gone and seen the movie. I think actually it was Mexican Iron Man who brought it up and asked it to Loki. Was about, did you have that Tom Cruise intro where he's thanking the fans for coming to see the movie in the theater?
Hmm.
And apparently that's going around all over the place. And I was like, I don't know much about Tom Cruise, but at least he may be a douchebag in some areas, but at least when it comes to his work and the fans, he does not treat them like shit.
Yes. I can't believe that we have to say that this is something that we appreciate, but yeah, absolutely. How nice is it not to be called names?
Well, look at it now. I mean, just for example, we saw the whole thing with Kenobi. Now, whether you like it or not, it's like they basically told her, "Hey, there's going to be some backlash because you're of this ethnicity, so just FYI, it's coming." Like, in other words, you created your own self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, yeah, they did, and honestly, I had to kind of shut down Twitter for today because that's all I'm seeing at the moment is people arguing back and forth. And Southern Viking says, "Be nice to your audience." Who would have thought? Absolutely.
I know. Give the audience what they want. Give the fans what they. Could you imagine a music artist coming out and saying, "Okay, I'm going to do this song, but I'm not going to do it the way you guys always want me to sing it. I'm just going to do something completely different, and it's terrible." And you tell them, "Hey, I didn't like that version. Oh, you just don't understand my vision." How far do you think that would go?
Hmm. Yes, I will be really glad when we start to get away from this sort of mentality, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But if you say Top Gun Maverick is a great film, and from everything I've heard, it is, I'm definitely gonna go see it. So, looking forward to your take on that.
It's
Uh,
a great escape. It's a great escape film. I mean, that's clearly what it was meant for, to be an escape film.
Absolutely. NB Geek, let me say a massive thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate it, as always. A huge thank you to everybody who joined us in chat today. You guys were fantastic, as always, too. We had some really brilliant comments today, so thank you, guys. A huge thank you to everybody who supported today with super stickers and our newest member. Very warm welcome to you. I will be back as usual on Friday at the regular time, but we also this evening have a fantastic show on Salty Texas Seas channel. So it's our usual panel show. We've got a great lineup, some fantastic topics to talk about. So we're really looking forward to that tonight. And I know a lot of people also are streaming and working very hard. So support all your favorite content creators because everyone's doing incredibly well at the moment. Let me say once more, thank you to NB Geek, and we will see you very, very soon. Take care, guys.
You all have a blessed one.